Well, honestly, a lot of that is because I have been a local musician in this town for a long time and was looking for ways to get my band's music heard from the masses. I started playing in bands back in 1986 or so, 85, 86. And I had the big dreams as well of taking my music to Los Angeles and trying to find a record deal. And I actually tried to do that in 1989. I moved out to LA on my own. About 60 days later, I threw my hands in the air and said, I'm coming back home. So we put some music together in the early 90s. And, with the idea of, let's do it from here. Let's do it from Colorado Springs. So when I got the opportunity to program a radio station that is in today's current music format, I wanted to do something that invited some of the best local music to give them a chance to be heard. We're here to help those guys, or at least help them locally. Just trying to find the really good bands that, to my surprise, there's a lot of them out there, a lot more than we thought. There's some that certainly rise above the rest, and that's simply because those are the bands that are aggressively writing new music all the time and having it professionally recorded, and they present us with something that we can actually play. How hard it is in this city to get your music on the radio, we wanted to try to find a way to do it. And so we started the Colorado Native, which is a way to celebrate local music. We were doing showcases downtown on Friday nights once a month. Now and then you run across an A&R guy that's a little more aggressive than others, and he wants to hear what the local market has to offer. Colorado Springs local music scene is so much different than the Denver music scene. The thing in Denver that I've noticed is they'll have some showcases that local bands can play. And with what we do, we're an alternative music station, so we're certainly not going to play Last Supper, and that's just not our format. Social media is massive. Word of mouth is massive. Bands like Hydrogen Skyline and Modern Suspects and Sound Studies have done a great job of letting other bands know KRXP is a station that might play your music. Send them stuff. We do a thing on our online where you vote for what band you want to hear, and we've seen a lot of reaction on people voting. So whatever it happens to be, it shows some passion one way or the other. So we'll feature those types of things, and we'll even feature the local music that comes out of Denver as long as it's good. My Body Sings Electric is a great Denver band, unsigned band up there. That's the way we kind of do it. We go after bands, word of mouth. Once the bands start talking with each other and everybody knows that there's an outlet somewhere in this city, then they start to gravitate to that a little bit. If it wasn't for, we're owned by Bayhackle Communications, which is based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they give us the freedom to program. They just let us do what we do. If our station was falling flat on its face, if we see anything that tells us the Native is the reason why we can't get off the ground, then we will address it at that time. But the Native hasn't hurt us in any way. I think people are, when you start talking about local music and you start supporting that, there's a group of people that really appreciate that. And being local and independent is a great way to, create your format and really build your format and create that awareness and build a scene for local music. We try to be very aggressive with new music. I've been programming almost 5 years now, so we started it almost right away. It was one of the things I wanted to do right off the bat was, start some sort of a local, program for local bands. And the Native was the trigger. When we first flipped and got the new call letters, it was Colorado's rock experience. So KRXP kind of fit in with the rock experience. That was how it kind of started. And then we think many reasons why the Eagle wasn't working. One of them was, our call letters were KYZX, which said nothing like the Eagle. When we first flipped, it was more adult hits, so we were playing, still a lot of classic rock, bigger stuff like The Police, Talking Heads. We were mixing that in with Hootie and the Blowfish. We wanted something that kind of dialed into our call letters along with our slogan. We're very fortunate in this market to be somewhat exclusive with our format, because if you love alternative music, you're not going to find it really in abundance like you find it on KRXP. So you get the opportunity to try some things out, and widen it up. And our umbrella is so wide that Lumineers and Foo Fighters can play back to back with each other, and in between you can try out all these other bands that maybe nobody's heard of. Maybe they're just hearing of for the first time. But, you know, some people are so anti-commercial that they'll go and subscribe to Spotify or Pandora or commercial-free music. I don't know. I think the battle is always going to be there, but I don't think we're ever going to, you know, have a clear-cut winner or certainly loser. Evolving to having a lot of options on how you can consume your entertainment, whether it's TV or music, you know. There's a lot of ways to do it. I used to see some numbers that show, like, you know, 90+% of people still consume their music through radio, with terrestrial radio. And if you're in the car driving and you don't want to hear a commercial, boom, you flip the station, and you'll find a place to stop eventually. The trick is always the balance on how many commercials you play in a row. What happens anymore? People, how many people do you see driving while they're talking on their phone? So, you know, radio or entertainment becomes background noise anyway. I could show you my house at night. We're all sitting there watching TV, but if you look around the room, everybody's doing this. TV's on, you know, it's the Real Housewives, and I'm only flipping through my phone because you're watching the Real Housewives. But you're not really watching the Real Housewives because you're looking at your phone the whole time. Well, I can hear it. I'm like, oh yeah, what did they just say? I don't know. You know? So yeah, everything becomes background noise. You know, the bigger these become, that's the real threat, I think, ultimately. When does Facebook and Twitter decide to take over the world? You have online streaming, absolutely. Yeah. There's always talk about streaming and how important it is to not just your brand, but your radio station itself. How do you get people to listen while they're at work, at their office? You know, if they're going to listen on their computers, do you provide something for them to listen to while they're on their computers? And what's the quality? How's the sound? You know, and streaming services have gotten so good with being able to take your signal and make it sound like your signal on the radio. It's all evolving, you know. You just got to find ways to stay in the middle of it and keep it at bay. If you're in terrestrial radio, you want to be able to utilize that part of it, but not rely on that part of it as much as possible, I think. I mean, ultimately, maybe that's how it works. You want to reach the masses, where are you going to go put your advertising dollars into in the future, man? If you're going to look at streaming and digital, then who's got, you know, what radio stations in the country have got the mass amounts of people listening? Ultimately, you've got to add that into your equation somewhere along the way. No doubt about it. I think bands can have a pretty good opportunity, local bands can have a pretty good opportunity by, you know, finding an end to some of that stuff. You know, the college radio stations are not rated, so it's not as if, you know, playing some new music from a local band at on KEPC is going to hurt you as it might hurt you if we're playing something local and people are tuning out of it. You know what I mean? If we're playing the new Sound Studies record on RXP and nobody likes it, they're leaving us, then we're going to know that pretty quick, you know? Where at KEPC, I mean, they don't rely on ratings. They don't sell advertising. You make money in radio with commercials, and you need listeners to set your price and to raise your price. And if you know, if you're playing stuff that everybody's loving, then the money's coming. You know, but when you're not rated, like college radio, they don't have to live and die based on what songs they're playing. I mean, what's the KRCC is? I mean, they do all kinds of stuff. You know, talk, music, blues. And it doesn't hurt them, you know. They're not selling advertising. They don't need to. So they can have a variety of anything they do. Same thing with KEPC. Sometimes when I listen to KEPC, and I went to college there to learn about this stuff, and I'm like, man, they're playing things I never even knew existed. And I'm wondering to myself, who knows any of this stuff that we're playing? Who is our audience, you know? Who is the audience for KEPC? And then you get, you know, brand new disc jockeys on who, you know, are scared to death when they first pot up that mic. I mean, my first break I did on KEPC was a complete disaster. I almost quit radio altogether after one break. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, so they can get away with a lot of that. And if a local band is, you know, got an end to one of those places, you know, they can certainly see their music being, and I think they do. Hydrogen Skyline is played up on the Air Force Academy station. I don't know if they're being played on KEPC, but they certainly have that ability to be able to play them and give them that kind of attention if they so choose, you know. And They should, you know, because it doesn't hurt them to do it. Probably not, but to have that feather in your cap is pretty nice, you know. I think in this particular market, I don't think there's a lot of people that listen to, you know, KEPC, the Air Force Station, which KAFA. You know, I know KRCC's got a pretty decent listenership. It's a much older listenership, I think. There's not a lot of, you know, 17, 18-year-old people listening to KRCC, but I think there's certainly a lot of 35 plus that are listening to that station. Same thing with KEPC. It's a very, you know, very narrow niche of format that they play, of the music they play. So if your band kind of fits into that, great. If you can get on that radio station, great. Does it help you in the long run? Maybe somebody will recognize your name down the road, you know. But I think for the bands, it's more of the feather in the cap deal. It's, you know, oh, dude, we're all over college radio. You know, KAFA and KEPC both playing our song. I'd hardly ever go to those stations to listen for anything new. Yeah, not oversaturated. I mean, I think at one time maybe we had 3 classic rockers in this market at one point. No, absolutely not. Hence the reasons why we flipped out of it and moved on. Now there's 2 classic rockers, 2 countries, a handful of top 40 hot AC-ish that I think all compete with the same artist or same audience. You know, that's why I love being the alternative, because there's nobody else in his market that's alternative. The local music scene has evolved over time. You know, I'm glad to see that it has. There's so much more now than there was back in the late 80s. Even if you were into just rock music in general, back in the late 80s, it was very narrow. It was, you know, the biggest band I remember out of the late 80s was Jag Panzer. And everybody was trying to sound like that band. If you were in a band, it pretty much sounded like Jag Panzer. I think, and that kind of stayed that way through the 90s for the most part. But then the Limp Bizkit thing happened. And so more variety of rock started to happen. Which was where my focus was the whole time, was rock. I didn't know what was happening, and you know, if there were country bands in town or whatever. But I love the fact that this city has developed. So many people in this town that can tell you stories about what it was like in the 90s and late 80s. We're going to keep looking for the new local bands. Sound Studies, Hydrogen Skylines, the bands I use the most for an example. These guys could, you know, be the next big thing. You know, and in some weird way, we can say we helped out with that a little bit. I like the idea of that.